Here we are for this week's Sales Confidence Masterclass for you, our premium member. I'm really excited that we've got Richard Smith, who is the VP of Sales for EMEA for Allego. Now, Richard's had a really interesting career, going through all the roles as SDR, individual contributor, sales management, and now to owning sales in the EMEA region for Allego. And interestingly, the business that Allego acquired was a company called Refract that was specifically focused on call intelligence, and now it's part of a wider suite of sales enablement technology. And I think also, if you haven't come across Richard before, he's also the co-author of a book called Problem Prospecting, which has been really, really valuable to the sales professional market. And I think what's great about Richard in terms of his approach is, one, he spends all his days speaking to sales leaders, but he's also coaching and developing very hands-on with salespeople. So I recommend you also connect and follow him on LinkedIn. Today's session is going to be focusing on discovery calls, at each stage of the sales process. And if you're someone that's leading a team, think about how you can apply this content to coaching your reps and how they can improve discovery. And if you're an SDR or an individual contributor, obviously think about how you can apply this in your day-to-day. Richard, I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, cheers, James. Thank you so much for the introduction. And welcome everybody viewing this live and also anybody retrospectively viewing this content. James has already kind of done a kind enough intro, but maybe just to kind of recap a little bit on who am I, why am I here? As James said, I'm the VP of Sales EMEA for Allego. Allego is a sales enablement software. We basically help companies do everything from train, onboard their reps. We help them do things like product launches, consistency of messaging, help their salespeople become smarter with how they share content with prospects and see kind of how their prospects engage with them in the sales cycle, but also how we enable their sales leaders to more effectively coach their reps too. Formerly to working at Allego, I was the co-founder of a company called Refract, a long-time sponsor of Sales Confidence. Refract is a conversation intelligence platform, and we were acquired by Allego in December 2020 as the business was looking to add this type of capabilities to their overall suite. About a 14-year career in sales. Started life as an SDR. That was way before the job title of SDR even existed. But I essentially did the same role and have kind of worked my way up the chain, so to speak, to being fortunate enough to leading on the sales org for Allego in EMEA. Passionate about coaching salespeople. Obviously, invest a lot of time coaching my own reps, but outside of the day job, so to speak, I do a little bit of coaching on the side with enthusiastic sales reps who are looking to kind of level up their sales game. And I'm also a Newcastle United season ticket holder, which is a much happier place to be this year versus the previous 10. So let's get into it. So how important is discovery? It's a question I think that's important to ask. And interestingly, I believe that everybody on this session right now are probably here because they apportion a high degree of importance to discovery as part of the sales process. Well, in fact, I actually asked this same question to a large group of salespeople not too long ago. I asked them, hey, what part of the sales cycle do you feel is the most crucial? And these were the results I got back. Quite a variance of results, but you'll see there that by some distance, people selected that discovery for them was the most critical stage of the sales process. I think what is maybe really interesting is that this question is probably quite simplistic by design. It almost indicates that discovery is this kind of one simple, unified stage of the sales process, when actually discovery really is taking place or should be taking place at all stages of the sales cycle, from top of funnel through to demos, through to even negotiation. Even when you close, there's elements of discovery. And so I want people to kind of maybe stop thinking of discovery as something which has to take place at one specific stage of the sales cycle. So people believe it's so important, but why is discovery so important? Well, here's some kind of bullet points that I've formed over the years as my opinion on discovery has evolved. For me, deals are typically won or lost at that discovery stage of the sales process. I can tell you guys for sure that I have been involved in sales calls where I've been running discovery. I've watched sales call recordings back when I see discovery taking place, and I can almost tell you to a T whether this deal is going to end in won or lost based on how that discovery goes. And this is why, for me, getting this wrong, I've seen deals go sideways at the discovery stage that, on reflection, if a better discovery had taken place, I almost, in my heart of hearts, believe that deal could have resulted in a won deal. But because we weren't effective enough at how we did discovery, we lost the prospect very early on in the sales cycle. Why else is discovery so important? It helps the prospect understand why the status quo is not an option. Or I will maybe rephrase that. Good discovery helps the prospect understand why the status quo is not an option. Everybody, even what you guys watching this as sales reps or sales leadership, everybody prefers the status quo. We generally feel like sticking with the current state is more comfortable than changing. As humans, we generally speaking, not everybody, but generally speaking, we dislike change. And for me, this is one of the biggest reasons I see discovery failing, is that we don't help the prospect understand why changing is a better option. Good discovery inherently builds trust. When we think about how do we get more prospects on side with us, we have to build their trust. And prospects, generally speaking, are pretty guarded people, pretty distrusting of salespeople. And I've seen ultimately great discovery taking prospects away from being quite closed book to being actually very much engaged in the seller. It's like if you correlate this to your personal life, if you meet someone new, a stranger, but they spend time asking you questions, being generally interested in who you are, what your interests are, you naturally start to trust that person more than the person who maybe talks about themselves or doesn't give you as much attention. The exact same concept applies in sales. And good discovery is as much about figuring out the deals that you're destined to lose as much as deals you can win. This is also why discovery is so important. We think of, hey, we do good discovery to close more deals. And whilst that is true, actually great discovery is about identifying the prospects who, quite frankly, don't have a big enough problem that you can solve, but you're probably going to pursue with them either way. And we all have them in our CRM. If you look in your Salesforce, your HubSpot, I can guarantee you've got people sat there that you've had there sat for weeks, maybe months on end, and you kind of tell yourself, they probably shouldn't be there, but I'm going to have them remain in my pipeline. But deep down, you know that ultimately, in your heart of hearts, you should have actually probably qualified that person out at the discovery stage. So good discovery is about helping you identify the deals that you're destined to win, as well as the deals that you're destined to lose, and to ensure that you're not wasting time on the deals that you lose. We lose a humongous amount of time chasing dead-end deals. And the last one about why is discovery so important, it helps your prospect understand why you. This is really key. I did a LinkedIn post on this very recently. Most discovery calls fail because the salesperson does not let the prospect understand by the end of that call, why should I choose you versus the competition? We live in a world where there's more competition than ever before. I bet you every single person watching this session comes up against competition. I bet you the competition that you come up against is increasing month on month, year on year. Prospects are finding it harder than ever to figure out who should they actually buy from. And one of the questions you need to answer in your discovery calls, or give the answer to your prospects, is why should they choose you versus the next competitor down the road? But here's the sad reality, guys. Objective Management Group, for those of you who don't know, they are a sales assessment business. They've assessed over 2 million salespeople against genuine sales competencies, and this amazing amount of research they've done says that only 41% of us are consultative sellers. Okay, so there's a good chance that many people watching this like to think they're consultative sellers, but really the data shows that we're not. quite startling when you see that, because we would all sit there and say, yes, I believe I'm a great consultative salesperson, but guess what? The reality is that far less than half actually are. Okay, so now I'm going to kind of go into the tactical stuff, right? And this might boil it down to being quite simple, but I want everybody to make sure that in your next discovery call, you provide the answers to the following questions, right? Because actually, when I put this content together, I took a step back and I thought, what are the questions that need to be answered for me to have felt that I've done a good discovery call? And I boil it down to this. Number one, does the prospect have a problem I can solve? Okay. I want you to read that back to yourself. Does this prospect have a problem that I know that I can solve? Number two, if they do have a problem, what is the extent of that problem? Here's the thing. Some problems are big and small. Some problems are really irritating, but we don't do anything about it. We need to understand what is the extent of that problem. Number three, is the prospect motivated to solve that problem? So even if it's a big problem, are they motivated to solve that? Little story, for about 2 years, I drove a car that had a broken car radio. I literally could get 3 radio stations, none of which I like listening to. I used to moan about it. I whinged to my wife about it all the time. I'm sick of having a car radio that doesn't work. Guess what? All I did was moan about it. I wasn't motivated to solve the problem. In my head, I was like, I'm probably going to get a new car in the next 18 months. The problem goes away. I don't want to spend money on getting it fixed. Think about things in your personal life, problems that irritate you, that wind you up, but you are never motivated to solve them. We all have them. Remember, we've got to figure out, not just is this a big problem, but is the prospect motivated to solve that problem? And finally, question number 4, which must be answered by the end of your discovery call, why you versus the competition? Your prospect has to know, why would people choose to work with you to solve this problem versus the next competitor down the road? Take a little screenshot of this, guys. I want you to print this out. I want to put it on your wall for your next discovery call. I want you to think of, as you go through the call, I want answers to these questions. And if I get to the end of my call and one of these questions hasn't been answered, I've basically gone wrong somewhere. Okay. This for me is kind of, if we want to simplify it, if we want to make discovery more simple, try and get answers to these 4 questions. Okay. I'm going to go into each one of these questions now, and I'm going to tell you where people go wrong with trying to answer these questions and some tactical ways of how to fix it. So the first one, does the prospect have a problem that I can solve? Here's where I see people go wrong. First of all, prospects get confused. Prospects get confused. What do I mean by this? First of all, we do a poor job of framing up the conversation. We do a poor job of helping the prospect who may have agreed to this meeting because it's been put on by an SDR, but they can't remember why they're there, why they agreed to the meeting. We've all been there, right? We've all had those meetings where the prospect joins and says, you know what, Richard, I'm going to be brutally honest with you. I kind of remember speaking with your colleague a couple of weeks ago. They called me out of the blue, but I'm kind of not really sure why I'm here, right? And we don't do a good enough job of dealing with that confused prospect, of helping the prospect not feel confused. It's a famous phrase in sales, a confused mind never buys. Okay, remember that. A confused mind never buys. The second reason that prospects get confused is that we do a poor job of setting a great agenda or a mutually agreed upfront contract at the start of the call. A great upfront contract should sound like this. Why are we here today? What is the objective of this call? What happens at the end of this call? And crucially, what do you want to make sure that we cover? This is what it would sound like in my world. Hey, James. So the reason that we're here is because you've agreed to this call today. You mentioned that some of the problems that we solve resonate with you, and the objective of this call is really to kind of dive deeper into that and to figure out really if there is a problem here that we generally that is big enough for us to solve, and whether you believe we can solve that problem. Typically, what happens next is that we would schedule a demo where I can specifically show you in our product how we can help address some of those problems. but I also want to ensure that we cover off anything that you want to get out of this call today. Is there anything specific that you want to cover? So what I'm doing there, you'll notice, is I'm kind of telling the prospect why we're here, what the objective is, what will normally happen at the end, right? Because a lot of prospects, they don't know what will happen at the end of the call. We have to help the prospect understand what the next stage in the process is. And we also want to understand what they want to make sure we cover. A great upfront contract can reduce prospect confusion. And the third piece as to why prospects get confused is that we ask them mysterious questions. We ask them quite sort of short and guarded questions about their sales team and about their processes, but we don't actually give prospects the reasons why we ask those questions. When we sound mysterious, prospects lose trust in the questions that we're asking them. They think that all the answers they're giving, it's all in your favor and not in their favor. So we need to be very mindful about the types of questions we ask and how we ask those questions. Second point of where do people go wrong in this is qualification before discovery. I learned this phrase a while back and I love it. Qualification is, can they use your product? Discovery is, should they use your product? Qualification, discovery almost kind of get put in the same bucket. They're actually two very different things. Qualification is, can the prospect use your product? Discovery is, should they use your product? Very different. Think about it, right? One of the things that winds prospects up is that they agree to a call, a discovery call. They put a valuable, say, 30, 45 minutes in their calendar. And what happens? The first half of that conversation, they're getting asked questions like this. So, James, how many people have you got in your team? What does your tech stack look like? What are your recruitment plans looking like over the next few months? What budget do you have for this? It's all these qualification questions. How do you think your prospects feel when they have agreed to put their valuable time to agree to meet with you, and you spend the first 50 minutes being drilled by the salesperson, which to basically say, are you actually a good fit? Are you worth my time? How do you think your prospects feel when the first half of the conversation is spent on qualification? Tell you something, prospects will lose trust in you, they'll lose interest, and that is why discovery calls fail. I know that some people out there might be thinking, but Rich, wouldn't you want to spend time with the right types of prospects? Wouldn't you want to kind of figure out in the first 10 minutes if we're a good fit? Here's the thing, right? I'd much rather give the prospect a good experience. If we get to the end of the 30 minutes and I feel like they're not a good fit for us, I'd much rather have spent the first half of the call making them feel like it was a valuable use of their time. Let's not forget that prospects are quite closely connected. They could go away and tell their colleague who might be a good fit prospect or someone on their network, hey, I actually agreed to a call with Rich from Allego, and it was a pretty horrible experience. It kind of made me feel like I didn't really want to be there. This is what happens. I hear it from when I speak with prospects. They tell me that they speak with my competitors and they feel like it was a dreadful use of their time. Remember, people talk to each other. So I'd much rather spend the first half of the conversation figuring out, should the prospect use our product? Do they have a problem we can solve? And the second half, figuring out the qualification side. Much more positive experience. And the third piece of where do people go wrong on this specific part of the discovery call is square pegs and round holes. We've all done it. We've all sold to a prospect. We've all pushed a salesperson down a sales cycle, knowing deep down that we can't really help them, or knowing that they aren't really a good fit. We all sit there, I bet we've got smiles on faces, knowing that we've done that before because we're under pressure to close deals, right? Here's the thing. My experience in all my years of selling shows that this will almost always end in no deal. Square pegs and round holes will almost always end in no deal, or they will result in churn. So don't do it. So what's a better way? Well, what I would like to do now, guys, is to share with you some nice ways to open your discovery calls that makes it feel like, I think a lot of salespeople have the challenge of, how do I open up the conversation with a prospect? How do I get them talking? Okay. But also you want to bear in mind that you want to help the prospect still have the context as to the problems that you solve. So how do you do that? How do you open up the conversation, but still not get the prospect confused about the questions that you're asking them and give them the context? And here's a couple of, here's like 3 techniques that you can use. So first of all, let's imagine I've started a discovery call with a prospect, and I say, hey, James, so let's just get started then. What was it about improving sales conversations that brought you to the call today? What was it about improving sales conversations that brought you to the call today? I want you to just have a think about and analyze that question and think about why that works so well. Bearing in mind that anybody watching this, you can replace improving sales conversations to make it relevant to your own company, improving forecasting accuracy, improving expense management, improving network security, whatever that thing is, replace it. What I'm doing there is I'm actually subtly inviting the prospect to tell me the problem that they have with sales conversations today in their team. But I'm doing it in a non-salesy way. What was it that about that topic that brought you to the call today? It gives the prospect context as well. They're sat there thinking, this reminds me, these guys do something that is about improving sales conversations. Here's technique number 2 you can use. And I almost use this as like a cold call script, and I bring it in my discovery calls. Hey, James, listen, I appreciate that you may have forgotten the reason that you're actually here today. But typically when I speak with people in your role, they share with me a couple of problems they have in their mind right now. They tend to either be struggling to replicate A-player performance, or alternatively, it's getting new hires to their first deal quickly. I'm just curious which one of these would be most top of mind, or hey, if there was one of those that you would want to spend most of the time talking about today, which one are you most drawn to? Again, you can replace the specific problems that you help solve. This is a really nice way, guys, for if you're struggling to find a way of opening up the sales conversation, this just gets the prospect almost pointed in the direction of travel that you would like them to go down. But again, gives them the context of, these guys must solve a problem around these areas. It doesn't sound mysterious. And here's the third approach we use, and we use this at Allego, is we have this kind of visual slide because sometimes prospects are pretty visual, okay? They need to see something to kind of get context to the problems that you solve. So you'll see this is a fairly straightforward slide that I've put together here. You could do this for your own company, where I've just put together like 5 key use cases of how people use our product. And this could be 3 use cases, it could be 2, it could be 10. And what I do is I just spend literally 20 seconds just talking about how we help customers like them in each of these areas. And what I say at the end of it, I say, so James, if there was one of those areas that really stands out to you as something that you would, feel like you'd want to spend more time learning about, which one are you most drawn to? So again, I'm just getting the prospect drawn, helping them the direction of travel in the discovery call, but I'm also giving them the context and of what we do and not being confused without giving them a great big sales pitch of our product. Okay, so we're going to go to the second question that must be answered on a discovery call. What is the extent of that problem? And again, here's where people go wrong. The problem is too small, right? We're trying to solve a problem for a prospect that is simply too small, right? It's not a big enough problem. Here's the thing. This might be quite hard-hitting news for people, but if the problem that you solve is not at least on the prospect's top 3 priorities, ideally the top 2, quite frankly, but I'll give you 3, it's very, very unlikely that you're going to have a chance to sell to that prospect right now, okay? Feels quite daunting when you position it that way with all the priorities that our prospects deal with, but if you're not on that top 2 or 3 list, you can almost forget about it. Secondly, probably one of the biggest problems that salespeople have is they don't go beyond surface level pain. They don't go beyond surface level pain. And I'm going to show you very soon what surface level pain sounds like and why it's not enough. And thirdly, is they don't understand personal impact. They don't understand how does this problem impact the person I'm speaking with right now. What I thought I'd do, guys, again, to help you, and feel free to take some screenshots here and print this out, is I've basically created this like inverted pyramid here that should hopefully help you understand kind of how getting down the levels of pain works in a discovery call. And each one of these segments, in my opinion, represents where people get stuck at. So surface level pain is the biggest section up here. Most people get stuck at surface level pain. Next, you get a lot of people who get stuck at level 1 pain. You get a smaller number that managed to get to level 2 pain. And then as you get to level 3 and level 4, you'll see that less and less people actually ever get to that level. And that's where true motivation to buy is. Level 3, you can correlate to business impact. How does this problem impact the business? Level 4, which is key, is personal impact. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to walk through an example talk track, like a dialogue between seller and prospect. And I will show you each part of that dialogue, what that correlates to at each of these levels. Okay? So hopefully this should help you understand here. If I was having a similar conversation, similar discovery call with my prospect about quantifying how big the problem is, then you can start to get a picture in your head about what it could sound like with your own business. Okay. So this is surface level pain. So let's imagine I'm on a discovery call with James Ski. I said, James, you mentioned onboarding's of interest to you right now. So let's start there. What is it about that what is it that made you pick that one? And James says something like, well, Rich, we're just evaluating different products right now as we're looking to improve how we onboard salespeople into the business. Okay, this is what I call surface level pain. Okay, we're looking to improve how we onboard salespeople in the business. Believe me, when a lot of salespeople, they have a big smile on their face at this stage of the discovery call because they think, yes, I've got someone, I've got a prospect, they're looking to improve onboarding. Guess what? I've got a product that helps with onboarding. And they move on and they even go into pitch mode and tell them about how all the wonderful things they do around onboarding. But believe me, guys, all this is right now is surface level pain. So how do you go down the levels? So this is how I would respond. So James, when you say that you're looking at improving onboarding, can you tell me more about that? For those of the observant among you, you'll see here that I'm using the prospect's language back at them. Improve onboard, okay? And all I'm doing here is saying, can you tell me more about that? I'm subtly telling the prospect, you're going to have to give me more information than that. I'm not going to settle for what you've just told me there. I need some more information on what does that even mean in your eyes. This is digging below the surface. This is trying to get to that level 1. Okay. This is what James, as the prospect, comes back with. Well, Rich, the current way we onboard salespeople simply isn't effective. It's all manual. It doesn't really get salespeople exposed to best practice. Okay. He's given me context as to why they're looking to improve onboarding. But believe it or not, I still haven't identified that this is a big problem. This is level 1 pain. He's given me some more context around maybe what there's a little bit of frustration there. But I've yet to identify truly the size of this problem. I've yet to identify the business impact, and I've yet to identify the personal impact. So what as a seller should I do to respond to this? So I say something like, James, typically when I hear about ineffective onboarding, people usually get concerned about how it's impacting on the ramp time of new hires. How does that match with your situation? So I want you guys to look at this and see what the choice of language I'm using here. I'm almost saying the reasons that you gave me, James, are not the true compelling reasons that I usually hear from prospects that make them want to spend money on this thing. Usually when I hear that, it means this. It means that they're concerned about ramp time. I'm kind of leading them to more of a business impact. And I'm kind of sort of saying to the prospect, I'm not kind of settling for how we do things today is a little bit manual. It's not enough for me. It's not enough for the person to change from the status quo. In this case, the prospect says, yes, that's definitely the case. Ramp time isn't where we want it to be. And boom, I've got the level 2 pin. Got the level 2 pin. But notice here that all I've identified is the pin. I haven't identified the size of the pin. So how do I do that? This is what it would sound like. I quantify. Okay, so this is the stage in the call, this discovery call, where you have to quantify how big is the problem. James, just curious then, how long is ramp time for a new sales rep now, and what do you think it should be? Okay, the quantification is the current state, and the quantification is also asking them what is their desired state, where do they want it to be? And James, the prospect, comes back to me and says, Richard sits on average at 9 months. We really need to get it to 6 months. Okay, I've quantified the pain. I've got some numbers and figures around it. Brilliant. Okay, but I'm still not yet at business impact. I'm still yet at that level 3. So how do I get to level 3? I say, what's brought this top of mind for you right now? Okay, I want to understand what has made James wake up this morning and think, hey, this is a problem that I've got on my top 2 or 3 priority list, right? This is what the prospect says. We've just raised our Series B and we're gunning for our Series C next year. We're about to hire 20 sales reps and we need to get them to impact revenue. This is the business impact, guys. It's the level 3 pain. The business, they need to get these new people effective and productive in order to get their next investment round. It's at this stage, not many people actually get to this stage, as I pointed out earlier. Very few people get to the next stage, which is the level 4 pain, which, remember, is the personal impact. How do I get that? Well, first of all, I don't ask a horrible question like, what's the impact if you don't hit that? That sounds very salesy, guys. I've been asked those questions by salespeople before, and I'm kind of like, it just feels super salesy. It's off-putting. But you can ask the same type of question in a very different way. Just interested, James, regarding that, how does that affect what you're personally trying to achieve? Has a very different feel to it, guys, versus saying, what's the impact if you don't hit that? How does it affect what you are personally trying to achieve? I'm trying to understand the problem that's being talked about. How is that getting in the way of the prospect's personal objectives? James would say something like, well, this is a key part of my role, what I've been brought to tackle. I would have failed if I don't fix it. And there is your level 4 pain, guys, right? So it looks pretty straightforward when I paint it out that way, but I want people just to think about this framework of how do I get prospects motivated to buy? How do I quantify how big the problem is? Use this inverted pyramid and just, again, think of the little framework that I went through there. Think about how you could use the same framework in your own conversations. But that's not enough, right? Because I still haven't answered really this question. Is your prospect motivated to solve the problem? We know it's a problem. We know that it impacts them personally, much like my car radio impacted me personally. But is the prospect truly motivated to solve the problem? And how do we figure that out? How do we figure out if someone is truly motivated to solve the problem? Well, this is where most people go wrong. Where do people go wrong here? They don't ask their prospect, right? Much like my wife never asked me the question, Rich, what's stopping you? Why don't you go and get this car radio replaced? If she'd asked me that question, I would have probably told her, you know what, we're going to buy a new car in 18 months. I'd rather not spend the money, right? I'm not motivated. But the problem is that we, as salespeople, we kind of shy away from just sometimes asking our prospect the question, okay, you've told me this is a problem. You've told me the size of this problem. I just want to understand, are you motivated to solve it? We don't ask prospects that question. This is what it would sound like. You've mentioned to me your problem about onboarding and how it impacts you. I'd hate to assume, James, but is this something that you're looking to solve now, or is this something for down the line? Okay, notice how I've asked that question. It sounds very non-salesy because I'm almost saying to James, like, maybe this isn't the big problem. Maybe, this is just something that you're a can that you can kick down the road for another few months. Okay, when you sound non-salesy, it has a really nice effect with prospects, because what I'm looking to do here is, does the prospect here say, no, this is actually really top priority for us, Rich? Or they might say, you know what, it's on the list of things, but there's other things more important right now. And if that's the case, I've probably saved myself a ton of time, right? But please, salespeople, let's just ask our prospect how motivated they are to take action and solve the problem. If prospects are motivated, they will tell you. And the last part of the discovery call, the questions that must be answered by the end of your discovery call is, why you versus the competition? Okay, same concept. Where do people go wrong here? First of all, we assume in blissful ignorance that our prospects aren't looking at other options. Believe me, guys, they are. They are always looking at other options. Buying decisions and the buying pressure from businesses these days will tell their buyers, make sure that you go and look at other options. People don't want to make bad decisions. They will look at different options and choose the right thing for them. We just assume that our prospect isn't looking at other options. The second way that people go wrong here is they don't position why people choose them over others, or why people choose competitor solutions over their own. And here's a little framework, guys, that you can use to really help position why people choose you versus the competition, or even why people sometimes choose your competition over you. This is what it would sound like. So James might be helpful just to tell you, a little bit about where we fit into this market. So first of all, others in our space, in other words, other competitors in our space, they tend to solve the problem around onboarding this way. Okay, and I give them a little explanation as to the competitors' take on onboarding or solving that problem. The way that we solve that problem is a little bit different. Okay, you're not saying that the competitors' way is terrible. You're just saying the way that we do things is a little bit different. And this is the key bit, guys. If tackling the problem the first way is important to you, then to be quite honest, competitor X is probably a better fit. However, based on the conversation that we've had and what you shared with me, then actually they're the types of things that people share with us that make us feel that we're a better fit. This is a really nice way, guys, for you to position yourself as to why people choose you over the competition without you feeling like you're, negatively talking down your competition. In fact, it's much more smarter than that, because if you just negatively talk down your competition, your buyers can smell it. They smell bitterness. They smell, well, of course you'd say those bad things about your competitor. Instead, if you say, you know what, if doing it this way, or if these things are important to you, do you know what, these guys are probably a better fit. However, based on what you said to me, based on like the specific problems that you've got, they tend to be the reasons why people would choose us versus the competition. It makes the prospect feel like they're joining a certain club, and it makes them feel like that they're making the right option. So again, keep this in mind, guys, as a way that for you to make sure that you get in your discovery call to answer that last question that must be answered, and why choose you over the competition. What I'm going to do next, I'm just going to wrap things up with just a few little other discovery traps to avoid that you might find useful. So some just kind of quick fire tips and tricks here. So other discovery call traps to avoid. Number one, poor active listening. Listen to the following clip. This is just a role play call. I want you to imagine that Mark here is the prospect. And I want you to, Mark's about to go on a long talk track of about a minute and a half, talking about his situation to the salesperson. For all you guys watching, I would like you to basically get a pen and paper out, and I want you to write down everything that you hear from Mark here of what you would deem to be useful information, okay? And this is designed to see how effective your active listening skills are. So here we go. Listen clearly.
Look, I've got a remote-based team. I've got a couple of SDRs that are making calls even as we speak. And then I've got 2 AEs, again, could be on discovery calls or demos as we speak. But I've got no real visibility into what's going on in those conversations. At the same time, look, I'm looking to grow and scale the team, as you've identified. I need to hire and bring on new reps. I need them to be successful. They're also going to be remote-based. I need them to understand what good looks like, and I need to work with them on the quality and outcome of their cold calls and discovery calls and demos. The only way to do that right now is to join a Zoom call live, which is very difficult and very time consuming, or to sit and debrief and ask them, how did your call go? What was happening? And really all I get is rose tinted views. I get their opinions, and that's not always the reality. And I get super frustrated when calls are happening, but I'm not seeing them come out the bottom line. And I want to know, is that because the SDRs are reaching out to bad fit prospects, or is it the AEs just aren't having the right conversations, asking the right questions? There is a playbook there on how to sell this product. There are certain questions that we need to be asking, and I don't know the team are doing that. So a tool like Refract, I've looked at similar in the past, and I feel like now could be the right time.
All right, guys. So that is a very atypical sort of response you will get from a prospect when you ask them, what brought you to the call today? And what you would have found there was an enormous amount of information shared by the prospect. Now, I want everybody to, let me just go to this next screen. Let me just, I want everybody to look at this list here that I've extrapolated out of Mark's talk track. And I want everybody to kind of almost look and see how many of these did you get written down. Okay. Most people tend to get about 7 or 8 of these written down, which is literally less than half of the information that was exchanged. My point here, guys, is that active listening is very difficult. You know, you're being able to take all this information in. Any of these things that we've identified here, we could explore in a discovery call as our next step. But my point I'm making here is that you want to be totally tuned into your prospect. You want to get super effective at taking kind of bite-sized notes, as you want to call, because this is the information that if you miss this first time round, it's very difficult to sometimes pull it back in. So yeah, look at the answers that you gave. See how many you got. If you got any more than 10, I'm generally pretty impressed. Okay, next little sort of Brucey bonus. Appreciate a lot of people on here might not even know what a Brucey bonus is, which gives away my age, but there you go. Competitor reflux. Okay. This is a kind of a disease that a lot of salespeople have, where the very mention of their competition's name on a discovery call by a prospect has this kind of like reaction where they can't help themselves to just spew all of the prospect, all of the reasons why they're better and greater than the competition. You know, someone could say, "Hey, are you guys like Acme?" And they say, you know, and they use that as their trigger. It kind of refluxes them. And to kind of bring this to life, I want you to imagine that this salesperson here is on a discovery call with Ronald McDonald. And Ronald McDonald is the salesperson. And the prospect asks Ronald McDonald, "So you guys like Burger King?" And what happens is Ronald McDonald gets competitor reflux. And he says, "Well, we're similar, but we have far more redeeming qualities. We do crispier bacon than they do. Our beef is higher quality. Our cheeseburgers are generally about 20% cheaper than theirs as well." What happens next is the prospect says, "That's a shame. I'm a vegetarian." Ronald McDonald says, "Oh dear." Classic example of competitor reflux. The prospect simply asked the question, "Are you guys like that company?" They didn't ask them to tell me why you better. They didn't say, "What are your differentiators? What are your USPs?" They simply asked the question, "Are you like X?" So when you next get asked that question, stop refluxing and going into this kind of like pitch mode. Instead, what do you think would happen if Ronald McDonald had stopped here and said, "Yeah, we are similar, but just curious. It sounds like you're familiar with Burger King." Or, "What made you ask?" When we stop and ask questions, we learn a lot more. Okay, and just one last one to wrap up is we ask poor decision-making questions. We get to the end of calls and we ask prospects questions like this on the left-hand side. Who's the decision maker? Should I invite anyone else to the demo? Who would sign this off? Is this something that you would make the decision on? A lot of these questions, they may be ineffective, but also sound quite salesy. And actually, you can swap these for questions on the right here. So rather than ask the question, shall I invite anyone else to the demo? What about if you asked, who would be disappointed if they weren't on the demo? And also, why would they be disappointed? You learn a lot more. If I ask, shall I invite anyone else to the demo? And James says, yeah, add Sarah, Michelle, and John. You say, right, great, I'll add them to the invite. But what if I asked who would be disappointed if they weren't on the demo? And James was to share why they would be disappointed? It's going to be much more enlightening. Who's the decision maker? Instead of asking that question, who else cares about solving these problems and why? Here's the thing. We basically live in a world where there is no one decision maker in a sales cycle. There are sometimes 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 15 decision makers with varying different levels of seniority. Instead, ask the question, who else cares about solving this problem about onboarding? And why do they care about it? You get a much more insightful answer. Who would sign this off? Instead of asking that, who can block this from happening? Right? I don't want to know who can put pen to... I don't necessarily want to hear who can, if not officially sign this off. Sign off is quite a loose phrase. People say it all the time. Hey, I sign this off, but they don't really. They give their verbal blessing. What I want to know is who can block this from happening? Who's the person who has the authority to kill this deal? And finally, is this something that you would make the decision on? Who would ultimately sign any agreement? Much more forward question, but it gets the answer you're looking for. If this was something that you were looking to really go ahead with, who is the person that ultimately has authority to put pen to paper? There's not many people in the business that have that authority, but that's the person that you need to be aware of. That brings me to the end, guys. Feel free. I don't know if there has been any questions from the audience as we've gone through this. I'm not sure if this is the.
Can you see the chat bar?
I have, yeah. I can see. Is it Tamir? Yeah. Right. So let me see the question. Would you walk away from a prospect who wins? This is something that they need to do your discovery, but actually believe that even if they buy, they're most likely churn. So that's a good question. I have been in this situation before where I've not been convinced that the prospect, that our product is a good fit for the company. In fact, here's a great example. I actually was dealing with this morning. One of my sales reps brought me onto a call where the company is, quite frankly, in my opinion, far too small for us to have meaningful impact on. And we have a lot of data to suggest that companies that we've worked with at that size end up being very, very high churn risk. And so, in my opinion, Tamir, as hard as it is as a salesperson, because it's like, let's take every deal we can get. And I appreciate right now, maybe that's more, there's more pressure on that than ever before. The reality is that there's almost more harm bringing on board doing a deal with a prospect that you know is likely going to churn. The business impact on that is far greater than you not signing that customer up, because you've got all of the hidden cost of onboarding, support, all the stuff that goes all of those that goes around it. I'm also some more questions, and thanks for asking these to me. Thoughts on pure discovery call versus discovery demo in a single call? This is a really interesting question. If you'd asked me this question 5 years ago, I would have said very forthrightly, discovery must be separate from demo. I've actually changed my opinion on this through the years because I think buying behaviors have changed a lot. A lot of prospects, they want to see something, right? They want to get something from a discovery call of value. And sometimes that thing of value is they want to see your product, right? So I would say that if using your upfront contract in a discovery call, when you ask the question to the prospect, is there anything that you want to make sure that you get out of this call today? If they say something at that stage is, I'd love to see something today, Richard, then make sure that you show them something. It doesn't have to be a full-blown demo, but you just want to appease the prospect. You don't want to be at odds with the prospect. You don't want the prospect coming off the call feeling like, I didn't really get much from that call, because you end up not being memorable to the prospect. But discovery is so key at all stages of the sales cycle. There are some prospects, by the way, that you set up a discovery call and they're quite happy talking. They're talkative. They give long answers, and there's simply no time to do a demo. And don't push the demo on them needlessly. If they're happy to talk, then just keep the conversation going. Another question was, I'm a terrible multitasker. Me too, by the way. Any advice on listening actively, but making sure everything is noted down too? Is it a good idea to listen at the moment and take notes on the recording after the fact instead? Great question. So the beauty of recording calls, and obviously there's no one that drinks the Kool-Aid on that as much as I do, is that you have the ability to review things after the fact. Helps you prepare for your next call with the prospect. The problem is that you still need to be tuned into the call and ask questions in the call itself based on what you're saying. So in the example that I shared with Mark before, he's using things like words like I'm frustrated or I need to get these up to speed. These are the little phrases that I'm writing down on my notepad as I'm talking to the prospect. I'm just little 2 words, very frustrated, need to get up to speed, remote sales reps. You don't need to write out long sentences, but the reason that you write those things down is you use those words back at the prospect. Hey, James, you mentioned that you need to get these guys up to speed. Tell me more about that. So that's why note-taking in the call is very important, but you just want to get strategic about getting clever about the length of notes. You don't want to be sat there head down writing out paragraphs of text because it frustrates buyers. And then Cameron, I think it's just more of a comment. I wouldn't say doing a full product demo in the discovery is worth it. Maybe show one thing as a FOMO thing also gives you another meeting. Yeah, it's a great tactic, Cameron. It's like tease them with a little bit. It's like it's like a Netflix episode, right? You kind of they give you the teaser of the next episode. They kind of give you enough to entice you to want to find out more. Yeah, that's another good tactic to do. Okay, I feel like I've talked a lot there. There you go.
Awesome, Richard. Really appreciate it. Also, just the way that you turned it into visuals is just super helpful in terms of like thinking of the framework behind this discovery, and also how you build discovery at each stage of the sales process is really interesting. So I actually got a couple of private messages from a couple of the people watching saying this is exactly what I was after. So really appreciate it. Really grateful. Everybody, you can connect with Richard on LinkedIn. If you could share the deck as well, mate, I'd appreciate that, so I can stick it in circle and look forward to further conversations. And also just note that, as for everybody that's on today and watching back the recording, is that we will kind of plug people in to Richard's network as well. And also, Richard, just give us a heads up when you're in London, mate.
Yeah, I will do. And I hope this has been super valuable, and you've at the very least got something to take away that you can utilize in your next discovery call, guys. So appreciate everybody's attention.
Cheers, Richard. Enjoy your day. Thanks, everybody.
Bye now.